It feels like we should start with the obligatory question that all politicians are being asked at the moment. As Shadow Health Secretary, though, it is quite relevant. Have you done drugs, and do you care that Michael Gove has?
No, I've never taken any illegal drugs, actually. And in some ways, I don't really care about what Michael Gove got up to in his 30s when he was a journalist. But I do think the conversation in this country shouldn't be about what the various Tory leadership candidates have done. I think the conversation in this country should be about how we deal with drugs in society. The so-called war on drugs, the way in which we incarcerate people who have taken drugs. I'm actually visiting a prison tomorrow, funnily enough, to look at their drug support teams. Isn't working when we've got some of the highest, when 3,500 people die from drug misuse in this country every year. That's double the numbers who die from car accidents, for example. We're the drug overdose capital in Europe. I think it's time we had a debate about drugs in this country.
Should they
I think
be
we should take a public health approach. Well, I think we should take a public health approach to drugs. So, for example, drug consumption rooms are not allowed in this country. The Home Office has turned down applications from Glasgow City Council recently to set up a drug consumption room. I don't think the current approach is working. As I say, we should have a public health approach to drugs in this country. We've also cut, by the way, the government have cut around 160 million from drug and alcohol addiction services. And this is at a time when more and more people are dying from drugs. There's more and more admissions to hospitals related to drugs, or mental health problems related to drugs, or poisoning related to substance misuse. So we're getting it wrong in this country, and I think that's where the conversation should be, a mature debate about drugs and how we deal with drugs for the future.
And how about decriminalisation?
Well, I certainly think decriminalisation should be part of that debate, and I strongly would urge the government to think again about drug consumption rooms. This is where people can come off the streets, can use needles safely. At the moment, we are criminalising people unnecessarily, and it's leading to deaths in society. And it's because politicians have run scared of this debate for too long. So I think that's where the conversation needs to be, not whether what this Tory candidate or that Tory candidate has done. In some ways, I don't really think that it's not sort of really relevant. There's a bigger debate we need to have in society.
OK. Now, Labour has done some research, haven't you, into NHS waiting times for patients. What exactly is it that you found?
Well, we're finding that people are waiting longer, 250,000, well, nearly 260,000 people waiting beyond 18 weeks for treatment, and huge increases in the numbers of people waiting for treatment. And often these are people waiting for treatment for very serious problems, whether it's to do with Parkinson's or whether it's to do with various dermatological problems. I mean, look, it is because we've had years now of the NHS being underfunded quite desperately. I understand the government have changed the budgets for the NHS, but it's not enough. But also it's because we have 100,000 vacancies across the NHS. We're short of 40,000 nurses in the NHS. Now, last week the government announced some proposals to deal with the workforce crisis, but there was no money, there was no extra investment in those proposals. There was no investment to bring back the training bursary for nurses and midwives. There was no investment to restore the professional development budgets. There's no guarantees about future pay either. And unless the government start taking some big decisions around investing in our staff, we're going to continue to be short of nurses and doctors in the NHS. And that ultimately means standards of care falling backwards.
OK. Now, move on to other issues. Labour, of course, won the by-election in Peterborough, even though the share of the vote went down. However, Lisa Forbes has been criticised for liking a video and claiming to have not read the text above, which accused Theresa May of having a Zionist slave masters agenda. Some of your colleagues have said that she needs to be suspended while it's investigated. What's your view?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn has supported Lisa Forbes. I've known Lisa for a few years. I don't know her very well, but I've known her for a few years. I don't believe she's anti-Semitic. I think she's made some pretty terrible mistakes that she's apologised for. I think Lisa now has to show and understand the upsets that she's caused in the Jewish community, and she has to work with the Jewish communities to demonstrate to them that she's not anti-Semitic, and that liking those Facebook posts was a genuine mistake. She said she hadn't read the text properly. I believe her, but I do believe now she's got to work hard to show people, to show the Jewish community and colleagues in Parliament that she's not anti-Semitic, and she's prepared to engage with the communities to demonstrate that.
What are the lessons that should be learned from Peterborough? Is it an endorsement of Labour's approach on Brexit, or is that actually something that you need to examine a little bit more critically, given the fact that no party has ever won a by-election with a lower vote share?
Well, I mean, it was a remarkable result for Labour, and I really do pay tribute to the thousands of members who were out campaigning on the streets, and also to Louise Haigh and Vernon Coker, two Labour MPs who masterminded the campaign. I mean, they're both exceptional campaigners, and Louise is really one of our rising stars, and Vernon's an excellent MP, so I pay tribute to both of them. Look, we campaigned on local issues. We campaigned on the state of the NHS. We campaigned on the police cuts in Peterborough. We complained on the Tory local council's utter failure to deal with fly tipping in the area. And I think what Peterborough shows is, despite all the fizz and froth in Westminster about the Brexit Party and Nigel Farage, it's a reminder that Nigel Farage does not have any answers to the big issues facing the country when it comes to the future of the NHS. He wants to privatise the NHS. When it comes to the future of our schools, when it comes to the future of policing. And actually, these are the issues that people still care about on the doorstep. And I think that's why Labour won that by-election in Peterborough last week.
And then just finally, I want to finish with a story that many people feel very strongly about. We've seen these protests, haven't we, outside a school in Birmingham, from parents who are angry about same-sex couples being included in the relationship education that these children are receiving. Now, a Labour MP for the area, Roger Godsiff, has backed those protesters and their right to demonstrate. Should he lose the whip for it?
Well, people have a right to protest, but people don't have a right to intimidate teachers, to bully parents, which I believe has been going on. I'm not a Birmingham MP, so I haven't followed it as closely as colleagues in Birmingham have, but that's what I understand has been happening. And of course, we all support personal and sexual education in schools. We have to be sensitive, of course, to different religious groups, but it's important that our children understand these issues and have that level of education. That's the Labour Party position. Now, I disagree with Roger Godsiff, and I think that people in the Parliamentary Party will no doubt want to talk to him. But it is important that children get a proper personal and social and sex education in schools. Of course.
Should he lose the whip or be suspended?
Well, I'm not sure if he should lose the whip, but I mean, I think he has to understand this is Labour Party policy to support this education in schools.